My mute sister spoke for the first time last night. Part 3. First, let me get one thing straight. I'm a girl. I'm not sure what led so many people in my last posts to think I'm a boy, but no. You guys have every right to be mad at me for disappearing. I've been so busy running a week-long camp and then coming home to the scariest series of events in my life. Forgive me, I've went through such a whirlwind of confusion and terror. I needed time to cope with what was going on and wrap my head around it. After I came home from camp, I wasn't all too worried about my situation at home. I had the time away to think on it, and I'd made my decision that I was going to find help and we'd deal with it one way or another. The first night I was home, the house seemed eerie. Melissa was in the same state of health, but at the very best, it hadn't got any worse since I'd left. My mom sat me down to talk about what had happened over the course of me leaving. Now, she was having the same terrible nightmare I had, with that thing standing over her bed and whispering. Then, she said her other nightmares had come back too, ones she hadn't had since Melissa was smaller. She also told me that some of the nights you could hear someone walking in the walls. I thought this sounded silly when she described heavy feet being dragged or sometimes stomping around above her. Except I wasn't quite sure if we'd had an attack because we rent, so the thought of someone in the attic and me not knowing freaked me out. After all of this, she said, "Rosie, we need to fix this. Richard, her fiancé, is so terrified he has left. I don't know what else to do. I even called the church, but they said it doesn't sound like possession, so the most they could do was send someone to bless the house." Great. Not only had the psycho whispering shadow man driven out my mom's fiancé, the church didn't believe us, and apparently the appointment for someone to bless the house was 4 in the morning. At this point, everything felt like it was just getting worse. Little did I know how worse things could get. The father came at around 10 o'clock in the morning. As I stood in the doorway waiting to greet him, something started to feel off. He approached me solemnly and while shaking my hand, asked, "Who lives in this house with you?" To which I told him it was just my mother, sister, and I. He casually said, "Oh, this should be interesting." When I drove up, I could see a dark figure waving from the front window. Now that I'm in this house, I know it doesn't want me here. How long has this been going on? I gave him the basics of what was happening, how long, and when I started to inquire how he could help, he cut me off. "I can't help you. The whole time you were talking, I could feel the pressure around me building. I heard its whisper. I can bless this house, but that won't make it leave. I came ill-equipped today, but I need to leave. Now. And make more phone calls. Don't let this make you turn on each other. May God be with you." And he left. He got up and walked right out the fucking door, basically crushing my hopes and reassuring that this was even more worrisome than I previously thought. That night, as I studied, I began to hear it. It sounded like shuffling at first and started across the room. The more it approached what sounded like the place above my head, the more it grew into stomps instead of shuffles. Right as the stomping came hard over my head, it stopped. I waited, scared out of my mind. The anticipation was the worst part, or so I thought. Then I heard, "Rosalind," next to my ear, clear as day. I jumped. I freaked. Of course, nothing was there, but I still couldn't stop hearing it. I cried myself to sleep again, which seemed to become the norm. The next day was a blur. Really, I went to work as usual, grabbed takeout as I headed home, but when I got onto my street, I pulled over to the curb and ate my dinner there. I just wanted peace for 5 seconds, and it felt so out of grasp lately. After I was done, I turned on the car and drove the rest of the way down to my house. As I pulled in the driveway, I could make out this faint figure waving from behind the sheer curtains. I began to sweat, nervous, but knowing there was no backing out, no running away. My mom and sister were in there. I opened the door to silence. "Mom?" Immediately I could hear pounding on her door. "Rosie, Rosie, please get me out of here." She was banging at her bedroom door, pleading me to let her out. That there was something in there with Melissa. That the door was locked, but not because she wanted to be locked in. Have you ever had a time in your life where you just know you'll either buck up or fall short? There was no part of me that said falling short was an option, and no part of me that wanted to face whatever was in Melissa's room. I told my mom I'd break the door down after, but she needed to stay in there for safety. I couldn't have her getting hurt too, trying to help. I made my way down to the hall to Melissa's room and pushed open the door. Of course, it was dark. I reached my hand in and flicked on the light. To my surprise, there was nobody in Melissa's room with her. To my even bigger surprise, it was just Melissa, standing there. Yeah, you read it right. Standing there. Now, many of you had some pretty good conclusions as to why she could have displayed spontaneous speech. But my sister is paralyzed from the waist down and half of her upper half. There's no way in burning hot hell that she was walking. I couldn't believe my eyes as I stood there, dumbfounded, her back toward me. She sniffed the air, turned around and seemed to stare at something behind me. Well, as best as a partially blind person can stare in a direction. but her gaze seemed to be falling slightly behind me. Do you guys remember when I told you I screamed the loudest I'd ever screamed when I saw someone standing over her bed? When she took a step toward me, this scream didn't even compare. Her legs grew crooked and inwards while she was growing up. They were also small, and she'd never walked, so I could imagine very weak. The way she looked, slowly taking steps toward me, left me stuck standing over how truly terrified I was. It's like someone pigeon-toed, walking on their tiptoes with exaggerated movement. I can't put into words to describe the way it looked, but I hope no one ever finds out. I finally snapped out of it after hearing my mom pleading with me to answer her, tell her what was happening. The only thing I could think to do was slam the door shut. I held the knob there and it jiggled around in my hand. Not too hard though, more of a if I wanted to, I could rip the door open, but I'm toying with you. After about 30 seconds, to stop, my mom came crashing out of her room, running to me. I didn't really care now. I let go of the knob and held my mom. The courage it took to open the door after my mom and I had tried to hold ourselves together had been immense. But she was still my sister, and I'd be damned if I let this thing mess with her, or mess with me through her. I slowly clicked open the door. The light was still on, and this time, Melissa was under her blanket, fast asleep, like nothing ever happened. The next morning, the father called and said he might have someone that would help. I begged him to come back, to make it happen fast, to just do whatever he needed to help me get my family out of this funk. I told him all of what happened, and he went silent. He told me I needed to stay as safe as I could until he could get the other priest out, because he knew what he was doing. When I hung up, I felt defeated. I felt like a sitting duck, waiting for something else to happen. That night, I slept with Melissa in my room. I wanted to see if something might change, but I hoped this didn't mean I'd wake up to her standing again or invite something else along too. I don't know what time of the night it was, but I began to hear the shuffling above my room. It took me a lot to get back to sleep. Even after the shuffling stopped, I just didn't open my eyes. I felt like a child, thinking that if I didn't see it, it wasn't there. Like closing my eyes could stop me from being mauled by a bear. Yesterday, it got quiet again. I'm tired of having quiet days. It makes me feel like it's stringing me along, giving me false hope it's over, which led me to today. I woke up and got in the shower, but when I got in, the water burned when it touched my leg. I looked down and there was a faint scratch on the side of it, like fingernails, which I was sure just happened because it was welted, and I was sure it wasn't me because I bite my nails to stop. Which is gross, I know. So when I got out, I decided it was time I wrote to you guys to keep you updated and know I'm still alive. Kinda, minus the sleep deprivation and the confusion on the walking but paralyzed sister and the terror in it all. We are expecting a call from the father today to let us know when the other will be out this week. I just hope it kinda dies down till then. I just hope we make it till then.